Can a single circuit expose all the flaws of a historic team like Ferrari? Is the SF25 truly ready to compete at the highest level, or are we seeing the beginning of the end for the Scuderia in 2025? Stick around, because today we're going to take a close look at the technical issues that are destroying the SF25's performance and how Suzuka could be the turning point for a team that had been promising much more with the arrival of Lewis Hamilton. Plus, we'll show you how a single technical detail has unleashed a storm within the paddock, and how this could determine Ferrari's fate this season. Before we get started, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Ferrari can regain its form, or are we seeing the same disaster as in 2023 but with a new face? The SF25 has proven to be a technically complex car, but not in a good way. What in pre-season testing appeared to be a logical and promising evolution of the previous concept has now revealed itself to be a machine with serious structural limitations that compromise its competitiveness. Ferrari, in attempting to create a highly efficient car in terms of downforce, ended up designing a car that operates within an extremely narrow performance window. This means that the SF25 can be competitive, yes, but only when certain very specific conditions of configuration, weight, track temperature, and load distribution are met. Under any other circumstances, the car becomes a difficult-to-control surprise. One of the most critical aspects of the SF25 is its aerodynamic map. In Formula One, a good aerodynamic map means having a platform that can maintain high levels of downforce in different phases of the corner entry, apex, and exit without significant losses or unpredictable behavior. In Ferrari's case, its engineers have identified that this stability zone is much smaller than it should be. The car abruptly loses weight if the roll angle or yaw angle is not within certain parameters. This severely limits the car's consistency over a long period, especially in race conditions where fuel loads fluctuate, tires degrade, and winds shift. Furthermore, this aerodynamic fragility is directly related to the choice of a pull rod rear suspension, a setup other teams have abandoned due to its sensitivity and difficulty in tuning. Ferrari opted for this architecture in the hopes of reducing weight and improving the diffuser's efficiency, but in practice, this choice has exposed the car to an unstable platform, especially under high load conditions such as at the start of a race with a full tank. In China, this setup was put to the test, and the car did not respond well. When loaded with over 100 kilograms of fuel, the rear suspension stiffness was unable to maintain a stable platform, resulting in erratic behavior and load losses that were measurable lap after lap. The difference in performance between the sprint race and the main race in Shanghai was indicative of this. With just 35 kilograms of fuel, the car showed competitive performance, winning the sprint alongside Lewis Hamilton. But in the full race, the numbers revealed a drop in aerodynamic efficiency and road were so aggressive that it resulted in disqualification. This wasn't a mere coincidence. It was a clear symptom of a failure in the design and understanding of the car. And this is where Ferrari's real problem lies. It's not that they don't have a car with potential, but that they don't yet understand how to make it work outside that narrow range of ideal conditions. It's not enough to have a fast car on one lap or on low fuel. In modern Formula One, where tire management, strategy, and constant adaptation are everything, such a car becomes a burden rather than a tool to compete for victories. This is the kind of technical crisis that can't be solved with a single update package. It requires a conceptual redesign, a complete review of the aerodynamic data, and a re-evaluation of the suspension architecture. Meanwhile, there are already whispers in the paddock that Ferrari could be considering major modifications to the rear of the car in its next updates. But every major modification comes at a cost: time, resources, and, above all, valuable points lost while the rest of the field continues to evolve. The SF25 at this point is not a championship car. It's a glass car, beautiful, comfortable, but fragile. One that can break at the slightest setup error. And in a season as tight as 2025, that fragility can be lethal. Suzuka isn't just another circuit on the calendar. For the engineers, drivers, and teams, it's one of the most demanding requirements of the entire season. A track that, beyond its history and charisma, serves as a definitive diagnostic tool. Here, any technical weakness or lack of cohesion in the car's design is brutally exposed. And for Ferrari, arriving with an already wounded SF25 and under worldwide scrutiny following the double disqualification in China, Suzuka could become the breaking point. The complexity of Suzuka begins with its layout, a fluid and technical sequence of linked corners, extremely high speeds in key areas, and constant physical demands on the driver. But beyond the human challenge lies the structural challenge. The Japanese circuit demands an extremely stable platform that can maintain consistent downforce during rapid directional transitions, elevation changes, and compressions in the asphalt. Specifically, sections like the first sector, the famous S, not only test the chassis, but also the trade-off between the simulator and reality. If a car isn't well balanced, if its suspension isn't working in concert with the aerodynamics, the lap time loss isn't gradual, it's abysmal. The SF25 has already demonstrated that its performance window is minimal, and Suzuka is the place where that can become a definitive outcome. On this track, there's no room for error or improvisation. Any instability in the rear axle, like the one Ferrari has faced since the start of the season due to its pull rod setup, is magnified. And if we add to that the recent resurfacing of key areas of the first sector, which has introduced bumps and undulations not seen in previous years, things get even more complicated. Because now they not only have to deal with a car that doesn't tolerate height variations, but also with unpredictable asphalt that can cause bottoming, the phenomenon in which the car violently touches the ground and compromises the aerodynamic platform. And that's precisely what Ferrari is desperately trying to avoid after what happened in China. Lewis Hamilton has already confirmed that the SF25 will run at a higher height for Suzuka so as not to risk another disqualification due to surface wear. But that decision, although prudent from a regulatory perspective, represents a direct loss of downforce. On a circuit like Suzuka, where surface efficiency is vital, raising the car even a few millimeters can transform a competitive car into a single-seater incapable of maintaining a top 10 position. Let's not forget that many of Suzuka's corners exceed 200 km per hour. Corners where aerodynamics not only provide grip, but also allow the car to survive the apex without losing rear grip. If the SF25 can't maintain its ideal height without compromising the flat floor, then it will be forced to go slower for sheer survival. And that, in Formula One, is unacceptable. Furthermore, there's a factor that few mention but that can play a key role: vertical elevation changes. Suzuka is a circuit with many variations in altitude, which requires the car's suspension to respond quickly without destabilizing the platform. The car bounces, it loses weight. If it loses weight, it loses traction. And if it loses traction in corners like 130R or Spoon, it doesn't just lose time, it can be dangerous for the driver. For all these reasons, Suzuka isn't just another circuit for Ferrari. It's a test of fire. If the SF25 doesn't sound like a dream on this track, it will be impossible to continue hiding the flaws in the technical concept. The narrative will change. From a team struggling to fine-tune its car to a team that must accept that the car simply isn't up to the technical challenge of 2025. And that would not only have sporting consequences, but also political and contractual consequences within the team. Because no project survives a car that consistently fails in the most demanding Grand Prix on the calendar. Suzuka has the ability to define seasons. And for Ferrari, it could mean the difference between embarking on a path to redemption or admitting that its technical commitment has failed from the outset. Ferrari is facing one of its most critical crossroads in recent years. After 2 races marked by technical inconsistency, management errors, and a double disqualification that set off alarm bells, the Maranello team had to react immediately. There's no margin to wait for mid-season updates or time for complete structural redesigns. Anything that can be improved must be implemented now, with current resources and under relentless media and competitive pressure. One of the main focuses of the work is being carried out in the simulator, where the technical team has intensified sessions to identify aerodynamic behavior patterns that were unclear during pre-season testing. The lack of complete data on the car's performance under high fuel loads, particularly with Lewis Hamilton, whose car suffered failures in race simulations during the Bahrain tests, has forced the engineers to reconstruct scenarios against the clock. This lack of concrete information is partly responsible for the setup errors that led to the disqualification due to excessive floor wear. In parallel, key parameters of the rear suspension are being re-evaluated, particularly regarding lateral stiffness and dynamic height adjustment under race conditions. The pull rod setup, while promising on paper, is proving extremely sensitive to varying loads. What worked during sprint sessions with 35 kilograms of fuel completely collapses when that mass is doubled or tripled over a full race. The consequence is a car that changes behavior abruptly between sessions, making it impossible to establish a reliable setup baseline for the weekend. One temporary solution that Ferrari has already begun to implement is increasing the car's ground clearance. This reduces the risk of further penalties for floor wear, but also sacrifices a significant portion of the downforce the car can generate through ground effect. It's a classic dilemma in modern F1. choosing between technical reliability or pure performance. And Ferrari, for now, has chosen to avoid regulatory errors, even if it means losing positions in qualifying and race pace. There are also signs that Maranello is considering a review of certain minor aerodynamic components that could help widen the narrow performance window currently limiting the SF25. There is talk of adjustments to the side air ducts, possible changes to the front wing flaps, and modifications to the floor deflectors that could mitigate the car's erratic behavior under changes in yaw and roll. However, all of these elements, while valuable, do not represent a fundamental solution. They are merely bandages over structural wounds. The real concern within the team is that, even if they manage to partially stabilize the car, other teams are already developing their updates without having to solve the same problems. While Ferrari is trying to reach a basic balance point, teams like McLaren and Mercedes are fine-tuning more mature concepts, with reliable data and without compromising performance for reliability. Internally, the tension is palpable. Fred Vasseur has made it clear. The errors in China were not the result of chance or the steward's oversimplifications, but fundamental flaws in the basic implementation of the regulations. The pressure that already existed on the technical team has tripled, and the arrival of Lewis Hamilton, who was supposed to be a spark of renewal and leadership, now also demands immediate results. The Briton has done what the car allows, even winning a sprint, but his patience is not infinite, and neither is his reputation. The 2025 season, which began with promises of redemption, is treading dangerously on the line. The solutions being implemented are palliative, urgent, and reactive. And meanwhile, every pointless weekend, every technical error, and every new sign of the SF25's fragility is undermining the project's credibility. Ferrari doesn't just need solutions. It needs to demonstrate on the track and now that it is still a team capable of winning. Because if they don't do it soon, the narrative won't just be about a difficult car, but about a lost season before even reaching Europe. Today we've taken a scalpel to the Ferrari case, revealing not only the visible errors, but also the true ghosts haunting the SF25 project. What appeared to be a competitive start, reinforced by a sprint victory in China and the impetus of having Lewis Hamilton leading the new era at Maranello, has become a collection of technical caveats, urgent decisions, and conceptual fragility. Because single-lap speed or talent behind the wheel isn't enough. In modern Formula One, the difference between fighting for podium finishes and being stuck in the middle of the pack lies in the details. And Ferrari today is losing the battle of details. We saw how the SF25, far from being an outright failure, is a car with potential, but one that's on the brink of collapse. A design so sensitive and dependent on specific conditions that any alteration, be it a bumpier corner, a change in tire pressure, or a small error in the car's height, makes it an unstable machine. And that's not sustainable for a team that has a historical obligation to compete for titles, not just to survive within the top 10. It was also clear that Suzuka will not be an ally. It is, in fact, the perfect setting to expose all the limitations of the SF25. The Japanese track is unforgiving of inaccuracies. Every connected corner, every compression on the asphalt, every change in elevation is a test that can drag the Ferrari to the bottom of the standings if the car doesn't respond with millimeter precision. The choice to increase the car's height to avoid another disqualification might be understandable from a regulatory perspective, but it directly compromises the most powerful weapon a team can have at Suzuka: downforce. Finally, there remains the bitter feeling that Ferrari is operating in containment mode, not attack mode. The urgent solutions aren't designed to make up ground, but to avoid another media and regulatory disaster like the one in China. It's not a race plan. It's a survival strategy. And when a team with Ferrari's prestige begins to act out of fear of making mistakes rather than confidence in its concept, then we're no longer talking about a bad run. We're talking about a problem of technical identity and leadership. What happens in Japan will be decisive. Because if the SF25 fails again on this circuit, exposing every structural weakness, it will be very difficult to sustain the narrative that it just takes time for the car to work. Formula One doesn't wait. Points aren't recovered. And seasons aren't rebuilt in the midst of a technical storm. Leave me your opinion in the comments. Do you think Ferrari can turn this situation around, or are we seeing another season where myth crashes into harsh reality? And if this analysis has given you a clearer perspective on what's really at stake, be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications.